right, everybody, it's Michael Shermer. It's time for another episode of the Michael Shermer Show, brought to you by the Skeptic Society and Skeptic Magazine. Here's our latest issue in print for color. You can pick it up at any fine bookstore or just go to skeptic.com/magazine and we'll ship you one right here from the offices in Santa Barbara, California. Or you can get the digital version and download it and read it on your preferred computer or platform or iPhone while you're out working out or whatever it is you're doing. All right, my guest today is Chris Anderson. He has been the curator of TED since 2001. His TED mantra, ideas worth spreading, continues to blossom on an international scale. He lives in New York City and London, but was born in a remote village in Pakistan and spent his early years there and in India and Afghanistan, where his parents worked as medical missionaries. After boarding school in Bath, England, he went on to Oxford University, graduating in 1978 with a degree in philosophy, politics, and economics. Chris then trained as a journalist, working in newspapers and radio, and founded Future Publishing that focused on specialist computer publications, but eventually expanded into other areas such as cycling, hey, love that, music, video games, technology, and design. He then built Imagine Media, publisher of Business 2.0 magazine and creator of the popular video game users website, IGN, publishing some 150 magazines. Oh my God, I can only handle one. And websites and employed 2,000 people. Oh boy, okay. No thanks. This success allowed Chris's nonprofit organization to acquire the TED Conference, then an annual meeting of luminaries in the fields of technology, entertainment, and design, TED, held in Monterey, California. I went there the first time in 2006. He expanded the conference's remit to cover all topics and now has TED Fellows, the TED Prize, TEDx events, and the TED Ed program offering free educational videos and tools to students and teachers. Astonishingly, TED Talks have been translated into 100 languages and garner over 1 billion views a year. Although I saw somewhere else it was like 2 or 3 billion a year. Whatever, it's a lot. Here's his new book, Infectious Generosity, the ultimate idea worth spreading. Chris, nice to see you.
It's very good to see you, Michael. And by the way, I counter your image of the book with the actual, that was a pre-publication. This is nice. What it actually looks like. So that.
It's always good to see the original version. Yeah. So, well, I kind of went through that long bio because, as you know, if you listen to the podcast, one of my kind of pet projects for the long term is how lives turn out, genes, environment, and luck. Now, there's been a lot already written on genes and environment. You could start with Steve Pinker's Blank Slate, covers all that good stuff. I'm really interested in luck, contingency, just the randomness of life. You know, you zigged instead of zagged, you went left instead of right, and then all of a sudden you're down some other path. So contingency is the right word. Just kind of walk us through your biography from that point of view. You know, what happened that led you to where you are today?
Such a great question. And yeah, I think that's actually the exact way that most people who've achieved anything in life should view it. Because there was serendipity of different kinds the whole way. I mean, look, the first giant piece of luck is, being born and having a chance, having a body and a brain that can survive the modern era. That's amazing. I was the Pakistani kids who I grew up with when I was 4 and 5 had no pathway to education. I did. They are probably still scraping out a living, if they're still alive, scraping out a living as farmers in poverty. And I got to go to an incredible international school in India with kids from every country, and then from there, back to the UK and so forth. And so I mean, there's so much luck. I was one of 100 boys in that area, and I was the one who got the education. Wow. And then just every way along the line. I mean, if you look at when we started the company, I started my company it was basically in 1985. It was right at a time when, first of all, when print magazines were still a thing. The internet had not pulped them into difficult existence at best, and you could actually launch a magazine from its own cash flow if you were fast with a launch. In the UK, it was much harder in the US, but in the UK, you could sign a contract with a printer where you would have to pay the printer after you received your first income from the actual magazine coming back off the newsstand. So I mean, we were able to double this company in size every year for 7 years. There were no outside investors. I did not know that this was unusual in business. I discovered it later, and it's pure luck. It's like it's a consequence of the specific business circumstances of that time, where suddenly you could use technology to massively reduce the cost of producing a magazine, and one little team of 5 weirdos in Bath, England could get national distribution. And on, just coming to TED when I did, and falling in love with it, and having an unlikely chance to buy it from the founder who was getting weary of it. I mean, that I did not see that coming on my bingo card, and that's really changed everything for me, because I feel so, even though the business ran into really difficult times in the dot-com crash, this was a beautiful sideways move that has brought so much joy to my life and so forth. So it's honestly luck all the way. And even right when TED Talks first went online, so online video comes along. It makes it possible to share knowledge. We could see that a few podcasts and talks at conferences were starting to go viral. But we, unlike most people, we happen to have already a good archive of short talks that were specifically created to break out of a specific industry, because TED was technology, entertainment, design. These were not industry talks, but most talks are only understandable by the poor audiences who they're aimed at. These were aimed at spreading knowledge across disciplines. And so turned out they were perfect for online distribution. And once the TED brand got out there and started taking off, as with everything else online, once you've got this sort of cyclic effect going, it's very hard for anyone else to come in. So we became, known for, those are the people who do those online talks. And but ultimately, yes, there was some risk taking in originally doing it, and I view it as, in many ways, it's what sparked the notion of infectious generosity. But luck, we were in the right place, right time, again and again and again. And I've noticed it. Like Bill Gates will say the same thing. Like it's not a coincidence that he and Steve Jobs created great companies at the same time. They came through high school at the same time. They had access to computers that no one else had. There's just huge amounts of luck at every stage.
Yeah, timing in history too. They say, had Bill Gates been born 10 years earlier, 10 years later, he wouldn't have been there at the right time, at the right place.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Exactly.
Yeah, so much of that, I think, if people understood the role of chance and randomness, contingency, luck, and so on, they'd be more generous, because they'd feel gratitude rather than, what's that kind of conservative model, just world theory. Like the world is already just, so the successful are successful because they're hardworking and creative, and the poor people, well, that's just because they didn't work hard enough.
Right. And even if it was just down to hard work, there's luck involved in that. I mean, do you think there's a reason why some people can work harder than others? What might that reason be? Did they do that? When they were 1 year old in their crib, somehow make a choice to embrace hard work? I don't think so. What happened was that they got lucky genes and they got a lucky upbringing, and they had the chance to maybe discover for themselves that hard work is consequential. It's luck all the way down. And you are right that it's deeply connected to generosity, because if you are willing to embrace that, you can wake up every morning and kind of thank the universe for the fact that you're alive at this moment, that the world is so amazing. And it's just completely natural then to sort of find a generosity mindset that says, well, what could I do to increase someone else's luck?
Yeah. Yeah, I want to come back to that, but just to punch that point home, because people say, well, I choose to work hard, or I choose to, get up in the morning and dash out the door because I'm so enthusiastic about making my mark in the world. Well, we know from behavior genetics that half of temperament, at least half, if not more, is genetic. And that, some people are just happy all the time. Other people are just grumpy all the time, regardless of the circumstances. It's just, it's just a temperament thing. And we know that need of achievement is this kind of a measurable personality characteristic. Some people just get up in the morning and they are just full of energy. They can't wait to get out there. And other people, they just don't feel that way. And that's okay. But, you can't take credit for all of that.
I think that's right.
Yeah. So Ted, let's just talk about Ted for a second more, because I love how you developed this. And and the way you phrased it. Because after TED became famous, I started getting invitations to other conferences where they want to do the same thing. Like, oh, we're going to charge $5,000, and then we'll have 1,000 people come, and we'll have all this money. And I noticed a lot of them then end up like giving tickets away to students just to fill the auditorium. I won't mention any names, but it's like, okay, how come they can't do that? And is it that it's kind of a market function? There's only whoever gets in there early, like the analogy I use, like, Rogan was in the podcast business early and often. And now he's, 10x bigger than anybody else. And I'm not sure anybody could ever catch him at this point just because, you just get in early.
I think that's right. I think in our connected age, network effects are the drivers of so many things. You can call them platform effects, network effects. There are so many examples of them where the existence of a bigger audience makes the product better. So the fact that TED happened to have an enthusiastic audience that was ready to amplify speakers' ideas made it much easier early on to attract speakers. Then the fact that those talks went online and, could attract a bigger still audience made it easy for us to raise our game and get better speakers still. And it made it just the whole wheel turns because people are there for each other. I mean, the more obvious cases in technology are, Microsoft Word, everyone has to have it, even though it's a horribly difficult program to use because that happens to be the format. And yes, a podcast is, I think, similar, that once something is known, it's much easier to get great guests. Joe Rogan can invite pretty much everyone he wants, except for, I guess, some people who might be offended by some of his views. But he can ask anyone he wants because he can transform someone's trajectory by spending 2 hours with them. And so because he has interesting guests, and because he's interesting, so, the flywheel continues. So yeah, it's absolutely a blessing and an amazement to be in a position where you benefit from that. And it needs it needs nurturing. You can lose it. People you can get past your time, and once toxicity of some kind spreads through your system, maybe it's very hard or impossible to change it. But while you have it, boy, what a gift.
Yeah. Yeah, it's called the Matthew effect. To those who have more shall be given. And it's true in so many businesses. All right, let's go back to 2006. I did my first TED Talk in Monterey. It was such a great experience. I'll just tell you a funny story, though. As I was preparing it, I asked a prominent scientist, I won't name any names here, did they really enforce that 18 minutes? And he was, I think he did TED Talk before you were even there. No, don't worry about that. You can just blow through that 18 minutes. No problem. I'm like, okay, good. Because I'm a college professor. I can't say hello in under 18 minutes. Anyway, so I prepared my talk. And then the first day, I was on the second day. The first day, there was a prominent female scientist who got up and at her 18 minutes, the clock was up and you got up and said, well, thank you, so-and-so. And she says, well, I'm not done. And you go, yeah, you're done. She goes, no, I got a few more slides. And you're like, no, you don't. And I thought, I was sitting there going, holy crap, I'm going to go back and delete slides out of my PowerPoint right now.
Yeah, she still hasn't forgiven me, actually. But, and by the way, since your time, the time limits have come down further, thanks to the cursed tendency of the internet to shrink our attention spans. Like a long TED Talk is now 14 minutes. Many of them are 12 or 9 or less.
Right.
So 18 minutes was very
But actually,
generous
as I learned, you can actually say a lot in 18 minutes. It's pretty generous. I had no idea until you sort of forced us to do that, because most of us college professors, we just ramble on effortlessly.
And the weird thing is that it will actually get remembered more, focused on more. Like if you want something to be consequential, the irony is that it takes much longer to prepare a good short talk than a good long talk. For a good long talk, you just write down 5 bullet points and say, okay, I'm going to say each of these things, and when I'm done, I'll move on to the next one. For a short talk, you have to sweat over every word, and it's that makes it able to compete with all the other noise that's happening online.
Yeah, so then after 2006, I remember you sent us all a box set of DVDs of the talks, which was super cool. And then you sent us all a letter after that saying, we're going to try this experiment where we just put them online for free. And I thought, Why would anybody ever again pay $5,000 or whatever it was to go when you can just wait a couple months and get them all for free online? What was your thinking there, and how did that happen?
So it was scary. We saw the possibility that you could do this. And we actually initially, it was from the 2006 conference, we picked 6 talks and just did an experiment where we put 6 of them out there, not really thinking that the kind of emotional resonance and wow experience that people had in the room would translate online. And we were wrong. The talks went viral. We had the thing that got me was just the tone of responses back from people saying, I'm sitting here at my computer and a tear is running down my cheek and I can't believe, or I'm having the first real conversation with my daughter in 10 years watching this talk. And so you read that and you think, holy crap, we're a nonprofit. We've got this material that the world actually seems to like. We have an obligation to put it out there. And it was scary to do it because there was a possibility that it would kill the conference. Turns out, and this is one of the key things that led to this book, turns out that the opposite happened, that the talks spread, but they increased demand for the conference, partly because it's a generous group of people. They actually like the idea of sharing what they'd had, albeit, a month or so later. They like the idea of being able to share with their friends things that they had learned at the conference. So the people who came, by and large, few exceptions, by and large, loved the fact that we were doing this. And it increased demand for the conference because suddenly millions of people knew about TED and wanted to be there live at the time these things were unveiled. And so I just I thought we'd actually seen TED Talks making versions of this argument, but when you experience it yourself viscerally, it really lands. In this connected age, the rules have changed. You can make a radical effort at giving something away and be amazed at what happens next. And so we tried to apply it as the operating strategy of TED, which is why we ended up giving away our brand. We started allowing people to do these TEDx events around the world without controlling them. And and so occasionally it went horribly wrong, but mostly it went amazingly right. And people learned from each other and they got better over time. And many of the best speakers anyone's ever heard came up through TEDx. There are 3,000 of these now a year. And they give us this bounty of content that goes on online, and the whole thing is run with almost no people. 10 people on my team oversee 3,000 global events. There's basically 60,000 volunteers out there doing their thing. It's their financial risk, it's their blood, sweat, and tears, it's their recruitment, and they have vastly scaled what TED could ever be. And so this is it. But give stuff away in the connected age. And be amazed at the ripple effects that can happen.
Yeah, I guess another question I thought reading your book is on the concept of the power law, where, say, the example is, 10% of professional athletes make 90% of the money, 10% of authors sell 90% of the books, and so on. So I was thinking about this when recalling Amanda Palmer's TED Talk. I think that was also 2006. And her example of, I'm just going to, just give this stuff away and people will give me money. And how much she raised. And I thought, yeah, that's incredible. But how many people tried this and they don't make a lot of money, right? And, so you read about like OnlyFans and, there's some of these women that make, $100,000 a month doing their thing. And it's like, yeah, but how many of them actually make 100,000? How many of them make, $1,000 a month or $100 a month? It's probably the vast majority. So how do you think about the examples you give, like in the book? Here's some incredible stories of people that did this, that 10,000, everybody gets $10,000 to do what they want. 2,000 people, $2 million experiment. Amazing. But, how many people have tried something like that and it flops? We never hear about it.
First of all, Amanda Palmer, I think was 2013, quite a bit later, so 10 years ago. But you're right that she gave a wonderful talk, and it was around this mystery of the era we're in, where it looks like the rules about giving things away are changing, and I think she's a total pioneer in the creative space. And there's no fairness to it. It is a winner take all world in many ways in the creative, in anything that is online, just because of there's so much noise out there. Attention is going to focus on things where someone says this is worth watching, and then a bunch of other people will go in and say, yeah, you're right, it is. And it's hard to break through. Many creators, have a horrible time. Like they try again and again, and they're probably doing very good work. And the weird thing is this, Michael, is that when you look at the actual mathematics of virality, it's weird. It's not what you think. So if 10 people see a piece of content that they love, and they share it with 11 or 12, with say 8 or 9 people, that means it's good. But nonetheless, that will go away. If it's just that bit more interesting and they share it with 11 or 12 people collectively among themselves on average, and that pattern continues, millions of people may see this. So a 20% increase in interest or in, attention grabbingness could make a thousands-fold difference in impact. And so, but finding that, what makes that difference is really hard. And some people have been really good at doing that, and most don't. And I think, there's a number of takeaways, but one certainly is that for those who do make it, it's worth remembering that there was an element of luck in that, as we've talked, and it's worth thinking about all the others who didn't have that luck. And I think it kind of creates an obligation to give back. I think this whole, we're going to be stuck with horrible acceleration of inequality, wealth inequality, given the connected world we're in, unless those who are successful really commit to looking to give back to the public good.
Yeah, on virality like that, again, just thinking about some past TED Talks that I liked or didn't like. You had Sir Ken Robinson several times. I think he's one of your most viewed. And yeah. I've never seen anything quite like that. He was so funny, but you would not describe him as a comedian. Like you had Sarah Silverman on stage. She's a professional comedian. She's funny. She was not funny at TED. I don't know what it was. Ken Robinson, if I tried to say what he said, it wouldn't be funny. It wouldn't be entertaining. I don't know what it is about that. How do you think about creativity in comedy?
First of all, comedy is such a gift. Boy, it's a gift, because if you can get an audience to laugh, it's just a wonderful way to open them up. People, most of our time, are encouraged by people like your good self. We are skeptical, and rightly so, because the world is full of crap, and our minds should be very careful about what we let in. And really the first job of any speaker is to make a connection. And one of the best connections is by getting people to laugh. Sir Ken, who had polio as a kid, he shuffled on stage with his stick, and he looked at the audience and said, "Oh, it's been great, hasn't it? I've been blown away by the whole thing. In fact, I'm leaving." And everyone guffawed. Why? He'd somehow communicated the literalness of, "I've been blown away, so I'm leaving." And why was that even funny? I don't know why that was funny, but once an audience starts to laugh, they just kept laughing. He told these glorious stories about kids and curiosity and about what was wrong with education. And he gave that talk to 500 people in the room and a few hundred other watching live and simulcast. Today, 17 years later, that talk is still viewed by 4,000 or 5,000 people every day around the world. And so talk about ripple effects. So he came and generously, no payment, no nothing, told us these stories and made us laugh and made us inspired about the need for more creativity in schools. That was basically the message of his talk. 10 years ago, a young woman in India watched that talk with a friend and was inspired by it. And she decided she wanted to put talks like that out for people in India who couldn't otherwise get an education. So she started this thing called Josh Talks, which is now seen by 50 million plus people a month. So this is what blows my mind, is that in the connected age, a single act can have unlimited consequences, like consequences of just unlimited potential. Now, most of them don't, and many acts, unfortunately, have consequences of unlimited bad potential. But, the game is on. We have this technology that we could, I believe, use for the greater good. And it becomes a huge issue as to how to win this battle of virality, of the sort of the generous stuff, the kind stuff, versus the nastiness that also spreads online. How do we win that battle? That for me is the existential question.
Yeah, we'll come back to that at the end here, what to do about social media and all that. I think you have some good thoughts on that. But I guess in one part, you're arguing a law of large numbers. There's 8 billion people out there, and that the numbers, even if it's a tiny donation, $5 or whatever, it really adds up. Like these stories about these OnlyFans, just these guys are giving $5, $5, but there's thousands of them that give $5. And it's like, oh, right. So it adds up. And again, it's like, Rogan has 10 million. So I'm always complaining to my team, how come I'm not as big as Rogan? Well, you're getting 100,000 an episode. So if you
That's
went
huge.
to the Rose Bowl and filled the Rose Bowl every week, would you be happy? I'm like, oh my God. Yeah, that would be like the biggest moment of my life every week. So that's it. Whether it gets translated into actual sales or not, donations, I guess that's the question. How do you convert faces and voices and eyeballs into actual, what's the right way to ask? I hate asking for money.
Yeah. So the business model question is unsolved on the internet, and we're in this awkward place where some people go for a pure generosity route. They give away their stuff, and then they say, oh, would you mind, please, maybe considering joining Patreon and chipping in something for me there. Or they're more transactional and say, you can have this little bit for free, but if you want the real juice, then you've got to pay. I think we're figuring this stuff out. Where I really hope we end up is with a more generous economy where people on the receiving end view what they are getting through the lens of generosity. I mean, from my point of view, someone like you who's willing to devote your professional time, a huge part of your professional time, to sharing your best ideas and bringing on the best people you can find with 100,000 people. That is an incredible gift to the world. And if you're a regular receiver on the other end of that, absolutely, you should figure out how you can support the effort financially. But I mean, I think you can also take joy in the fact that the ideas you're sharing have consequence, and it's frustrating that you will actually never know the most important of those consequences. It was only last year I discovered Josh Talks and that incredible story. And it might, it's a story that was big enough to, if my whole professional life had been to seed Josh Talks, I would be a happy person. And so there's no neat way that we're doing this. The traditional capitalist economy is easy. Everything's transactional. Give me your money, I'll give you a product. We're entering a richer world full of possibility that I think will have many, many, many different models in. And I just think that I certainly feel great sympathy for the creators who are doing brilliant work and struggling to make a living out of it, even though their work is being appreciated by many people. And I think on the receiving end of that, take every opportunity, if you can afford to do so, take every opportunity to thank and reward the people who are doing that stuff.
Yeah. All right, let's talk about generosity, altruism, reciprocal altruism, evolutionary theory, and human nature. I'll read this passage from your book. A few years ago, I heard a tale that gripped me. There was a nighttime break-in at a beautiful old house packed with exotic, valuable objects. The burglar gasped in awe as he carefully guided his flashlight over the giant oil paintings on the wall and the polished antique furniture shrouded in it with expensive silks. But before he could pick anything up, he was stopped in his tracks by a loud voice above his head. Jesus is watching you. Fighting to stay calm, turned the flashlight upward and then guffawed in relief. Ha, you're just a parrot. Bless you, Jesus. Actually, my name's Polly. Jesus is the Rottweiler standing behind you. That's such a great story. Oh, but you also mentioned, because of your background, which I also read for a reason, in my 20s, this is you speaking, in my 20s, when I was slowly letting go of my religious beliefs, one key question gave me pause. Without God in my life, what reason would I ever have to try to do the right thing? Okay? Speak to that. Do we need religion to be generous?
Yeah, so for years, I did. At least I thought I did. Because I certainly knew that in my own life, a lot of the motivation I had to be good was this complex mixture of a sense of obligation, a sense of delight in, pleasing God, if you like, but also a fear that if I didn't, I was in trouble. So that sense of Jesus is watching you. For some kids, it's Santa Claus is watching you. It's a tool that parents and religions have used for centuries to try to bring out the best behavior in kids. And before you laugh it off and dismiss it, how do we know that kids will behave well without that? Arguably, we're conducting a social experiment right now where religion's gradually drifting away, and some people would say that the world is getting meaner, or people are behaving that they're not reminded as often to behave ethically. So anyway, I thought so there was that, and then philosophically, I mean, I studied philosophy, and I couldn't see how you could find a reason to be good in a world without that external, conscious, that external requirement. Because science, evolution, we're animals. There is no objective reason why someone should be anything other than selfish. If without God there, why wouldn't I just live my best life for my own pleasure? And it really wasn't until I started reading people like Steven Pinker, How the Mind Works, where he introduced me to evolutionary psychology and this notion that actually this, red in tooth and claw world of Darwinian evolution can often create beings that are kind and generous and altruistic and actually act in the interests of others in their species, sometimes even at the risk of their own lives. Well, that's weird. How did that happen? There's actually an ongoing scientific debate about how exactly it happened, but there's several plausible pathways. And, one is just that if you have a species that has a memory, and you have instances where there are asymmetric opportunities to be kind. In other words, by that I mean, it's easy for the effort to be kind. So say to share a piece of meat that I've obtained from a carcass that, I won't be able to eat all of it anyway. To share that piece of meat with a neighbor who's hungry, that's a powerful thing to do because they will remember that. It was easy for you to do. And then next week, they may share it back with you. And so you get this sort of reciprocal effects happening. And it's plausible to imagine how a species could evolve this whole group of feelings around this of, I want to help that person. I also want to hold that person to account. Like no one, no human society likes freeloaders or cheaters. We all have the sense of fairness. We want to be kind, but we also want people to respond appropriately. And so anyway, so this was the amazing. So that was one thing that happened, was that I saw that intellectually. The other thing that happened was that I just saw numerous people who weren't religious being spectacularly good, doing amazing work. And then other reasons happened to take away my faith. Just the implausibility of a God who was both good and controlled everything, and yet look at the world and the nastiness that's there. So I came away from religion, but still felt passionately that it was, a key point of life was to seek to be your best self. And one of the delightful pieces that emerges from the science is that if you do that, you actually will be happier. You actually end up with a more satisfied life. That last bit is a bit that I think is way underreported, and I think it's absolutely fine to think of generosity as in the long-term interest of the giver. We've always said it's always been that way. Actually, give and you shall receive. Give and your reward will be in heaven. Whatever that. All of those things are basically framing generosity in a way that is in the long-term interest of the giver. So it's rational to do it as well as good to do it. And I wish more people knew just how deep that feeling is. There's this astonishing Gallup survey that I don't fully believe, but I guess I believe it because it was 230,000 people. And they asked among the questions they asked, it was a whole lot, cross multi-question survey, but one of the questions they asked was whether people had donated to charities or whatever recently in the last month. Those people had a high level of happiness equivalent to their income being doubled. Like it's a wild result because what we think about is how do I how do I get more successful? Like most of us think 20 or 30% more success. We're there. That's it. And we get that, and then 6 months later, maybe we just need another 20 or 30%. Doubling your income is sort of that's not far off winning the lottery, but you can get the same psychic result by actually adopting a sort of generosity lifestyle. That's much more in your control, by the way. And so I just wish that was more widely reported.
Is this a kind of a form of Aristotle's virtue ethics, where by behaving ethically and virtuous, you actually become it, you actually start to feel it, and then you're even more ethical and virtuous, and you get in a positive cycle?
Yes, I think that's two things that he was implying there. One is just that being kind is a muscle, and if you repeatedly exercise it, it gets stronger and it gets easier and it gets more natural. So there's that. But yes, you also discover this feeling of I like this version of me. I like this version of me, and so you want to do it more. And so I think there is a cycle there. Absolutely.
Yeah, I think if we treat it as a game theory problem, you just take kind of Dawkins' selfish gene model and start there. All of us want what's best for ourselves and our kin and kind, but so does the other guy, and you know that. So you can't treat this other person as just a piece of meat that you can exploit. You actually have to, convey to them that that they want what you want, and that that they know that and so on. But it's not enough to fake it, because we're fairly good at detecting psychopaths. 1 to 3% of the population are psychopathic and Machiavellian and narcissistic, and we recognize that if you have enough experience with these people that you hang out with. That guy, I don't trust that guy, just from experience. That's what gossip is all about. So you can't fake it. You actually have to feel it and believe it, and then you act better. And that's, in a way, kind of, I guess, without religion, it's the best we can have for a transcendent moral value that's transcendent to me personally, or my culture, or American values, or whatever. It's in the species. I feel better about myself, and that actually has consequences.
I think that's right. I think if we all had to sit there and calculate it, we'd struggle to get there. I think it's because we've evolved this little packet of feelings around empathy and fairness and caring for each other and so forth. It's part of us. It's actually wired deeply into us. That's the thing. It's not something that you just choose to be because you're religious. It's something that we actually all are at heart. And if we ignore that part of ourselves, we will end up smaller and grumpier and less happy. And so, so I think it's actually an amazing thing that, and it's one of our species' most important superpowers that we can do this.
Yeah, I was thinking of I was just looking up Rick Warren and the Purpose Driven Life. You had one of the years I spoke, you had Dan Dennett and him back to back. And I remember listening to Rick Warren. It's like, oh my God, this guy is like, Mother Teresa. And Dan was like sharpening his teeth. I'm going to get this guy. I'm like, easy. I mean, let's recognize religion when it does good. It does plenty of bad. And, I cite those too, but, come on. And in a way, I think sometimes religious ceremonies are a way of dealing with human nature. They know what human nature is like. So they know that we're going to remind you every week, let's be good, let's be generous. And we're praying for so-and-so and so-and-so in our community this Sunday because so-and-so has cancer and this person, whatever happened to them. And of course, you and I don't believe in the supernatural divine intervention there, but it does have an effect. It's kind of reminding everybody, in addition to being, your normal selfish, selves that we all are, don't forget to be generous and nice too. And it's and then people feel good about that. But in a way, it's saying people need to be reminded.
I think that's profoundly correct. I think one of the things that we may have lost by moving away from religion is this understanding. The religious view that I grew up certainly is that that humans are fallen, that we're born into sin. And that's sort of creepy, horrible language. But what is good about it is that from the get-go, you see life as a battle to find your best self. It's a battle between your internal demons and angels, if you like. Actually, science credibly says that there actually is a version of that is true, that there is, we are complex beings. We've evolved these different parts to our brain. And at the very least, you can think of yourself, as Danny Kahneman has pointed out, as having this sort of system 1 and system 2 ways of thinking, fast thinking, slow thinking, our instinctive selves that drive so much of what we do. And then our reflective selves that actually tell the story of who we want to be. It's the way in which we try to shape who we are. In John Haidt's metaphor, it's the little boy trying to guide the elephant. And in every part of life, that battle plays out, diet, working out, whatever. But it's not something that we teach in school properly, I think. Like, to me, this should be an absolutely core part of education. In a way, the whole purpose of education is to give you the tools to elevate your reflective self over your instinctive self. There should be lessons on how you build relationships, how you end an argument, how you plan your time and money to better extent, to the goals of your reflective self, how you notice when you're being driven in a way that you don't want, and how you develop the tools to correct that. It can start with every mother's advice to a child when they're angry: stop, count to 10. That's putting away your lizard brain, your your instinctive brain, and saying, hello, reflective self, come to the party. And so to me, what one thing that those religious gatherings did, and that we've lost, is that they brought people together, and you had an hour or whatever to remind yourself that there were things bigger than you in the world, and that community mattered, and morality mattered, and so forth. Alain de Botton has a wonderful TED Talk on this, by the way, Atheism 2.0, where he makes this argument that it can't be a coincidence that all of these religions summoned people every week to try to find their better selves. And what are we doing that's the equivalent of that? We're not doing anything that's the equivalent of that. And I think that may be part of the reason why we're struggling in some aspects of society. We're free of a lot of stuff, but it's dangerous what we're doing, I think.
Wasn't he trying to construct like secular churches, the equivalent of that?
Right. So he was, and they, I think they had a little bit of success. There's been a few efforts at that. I think most non-religious people find it creepy to imagine kind of gathering in a building and singing odes of joy together to the wonders of the universe and whatever. But
Ode to Newton.
But weirdly, just that act of joining together and singing is so powerful. I mean, go to a football game in England and try not to be moved by like when you're in the middle of a swaying crowd singing at the top of their voice, you feel transcendent, like you do, and it's so we're ignoring some of the most important parts of our biology, even of how we awaken our reflective selves, I think.
Okay, let's talk about how much you should be giving and who should be giving what. So it's easy if you're Bill Gates to be generous. From the perspective of an average person who's just trying to pay the bills each month, and as you know from these surveys, some significant percentage of people, if they have a setback financially for a healthcare issue or whatever, they can't cover the bill. Or when they retire at 65, they don't have $100,000 or $1 million saved up. They got almost nothing. So what did they? They're sitting there going, "What am I going to do? I want to be generous, but I'm not Bill Gates."
Well, the first thing to say is that there's many ways to be generous, and most of them actually don't involve money. It's the ordinary, everyday acts of human kindness. Just paying attention to someone, looking at them, letting them know that they matter. That's often the best generosity there is, or hospitality. Even if it's giving someone a cup of tea, there's generosity to that, and beautiful things can come from that. Or sharing the friends you have with other people is an incredible act of generosity. So there's so many things like that. I think in our modern age, just acting as a bridger online, like trying to be not be the person who inflames the divisions that are growing, but to be the person who says, wait a sec, that person has a story, give them a chance, tell me more what you mean, who uses curiosity and respect mixed in with the outrage and whatever that is currently takes over these conversations. So there's all of that. And I think it's someone who's struggling. The last thing they should feel is guilty about the fact that they're not giving money to a charity or something like that. But in the West, many of us are pretty comfortably off. And although you can always find new things to spend and always find new reasons for financial stress, if we put our minds to it, we actually could find a pathway to giving something. The measure of generosity is, of course, as every religion teaches, and it's just common sense. It's not in the absolute amount given. It's how meaningful it is to you, how hard it is for you. And so the first thing to think about is it's not absolute amounts, but percentages. And it's one of the best pledges out there is based on the Jewish and Christian tradition of tithing, giving 10% of income. That's a tough thing to do for a lot of people, but a good thing to do. When you move up to the Bill Gates of this world, it's not an adequate thing to do. I think we can expect more from the very rich, and someone like Bill Gates is indeed doing that. In my book, I try and make the argument that we should pay attention to another religious tradition as well, Islam, which asks for the wealthy in a society to give 2.5% of their net worth each year. That is about 3 times what billionaires and other very rich people are currently giving, just on average. And if that amount was given or more, it would raise an unbelievable amount of money that could be used to tackle most of the world's tough problems, actually. So I guess what I'd say is this: consider, if you're comfortable, consider adopting that as an aspirational pledge.
Okay, hang on. So 2.5%. So if I'm worth $1 million, that's $25,000, 2.5%.
Yeah.
I would give every year.
Yes.
And I easily make more than that just if it's just sitting in the stock market making 10% a year.
That's right. So that's the argument, is that you should be able to afford to do that. I mean, someone who's worth $1 million may well be also earning, I don't know, $250,000 or something like that. And so there, 10% of income is about the same. But as the wealth level goes up from that, often income doesn't rise proportionately, and many of the most wealthy don't have any income at all. And so saying to them, saying to them, 25% of your income is, 10% of your income is nothing. Whereas if you said, if they would sign up to doing 10% of their net worth each year, that actually starts to make a really material difference to the wealth inequality we're facing. And I think it's doable. I think what it does is something amazing. If, like, a lot of the very rich have signed the Giving Pledge, they want to give back. I've spoken with them. I know that they want to give back. Not all of them, many of them. And but it's really hard to give away very large amounts of money effectively, and so it keeps getting pushed down the road. By committing to 2.5% of your net worth every year, what that does is it forces you to have with your family a sort of strategic discussion. Okay, like if you're a billionaire, that means committing to giving away a minimum of $25 million every year. That's a lot of money to give away, and it's hard to do it wisely. So you have to sit down with your family and say, what do we really care about? And what are the organizations who could most help advance that cause? And you start to go on a journey where you get engaged in an issue, and you learn a bit each time. And I just think that's an important journey that certainly the very rich should do. But anyone who, there's this wonderful site out there, givingwhatwecan.org, that makes it easy to sign a pledge, and they'll help track it for you. You don't have to start at 10% of your income. You can start lower, start at whatever you want to, and maybe build it up. But the process of making a pledge at all shifts your financial giving from impulse, which is often lovely in the moment, but it's just an impulse. Too wise and too strategic. And you can think about how to really spend the money for maximum impact. I think that's an important thing to do. And when you do that and do it well, it carries with it its own deep satisfaction.
Yeah. Okay. So where should I give my money? All right. So I used to just donate to the typical old school ones, Red Cross or Jerry's Kids or whatever, and then I started following Peter Singer. It's like, oh yeah. Okay. So if, half my money goes to overhead and, new buildings and salaries, or, that, like the story of the NRA guy, who just got busted for spending all that money on trips and whatever. And it's like, I don't want that. Yeah. Okay. So, kind of a rational version of giving.
Yeah. Well, funnily enough, I don't think we should be that frightened of overheads. There's a wonderful, wonderful TED talk by Dan Pallotta, Pallotta, on this, that says often overheads are actually code for people doing the hardest work of a charity. Like some charities just pass through, right? You give them money and they pass it on, and they're sure the overhead is a worthy thing to look at. Most of the best nonprofits are people trying to change a system to make it better, and you actually often. So the actual thing you should be looking at is what is the impact that organization is achieving overall. My wife's incredible nonprofit, Acumen, invests in entrepreneurs. It uses patient capital that the market wouldn't do to invest in entrepreneurs who are building companies that can, solve problems like health and clean water and energy and so forth. And so, they'll take 10 to 15 years to get a company to the right place. After that time, that company can affect millions of people. No more philanthropy needed, and so it's a great example of what I would call leverage, where you're leveraging the power of entrepreneurship, and there's many other types of leverage that you can look for. Sometimes just finding an organization that's using a specific piece of technology to do something that couldn't be done in somewhere before. Like an irrigation pump or whatever, if you can supply those cost effectively to a farmer, you may be able to double their income, and pay back for the thing in a year. So there's, I think, paying attention, thinking about it, looking for a form of leverage and finding the one that appeals to you. Education is an incredible leverage. You invest in an organization like Educate Girls in India, where they are they are bringing millions of girls from remote villages into schools for the first time. A whole life is changed. I think the cost works out at about $70 per girl's life. I mean, that's pretty amazing value for money right there. And it's because they have a system worked out that knows how to get into these villages and persuade the elders and so forth, so on and so forth. So it's finding the leverage, and many of the best examples are indeed at home. I mean, the Red Cross is a wonderful organization. It's finding what you care about and trying to. I think because it's hard to give away as a habit, you have to build the habit, and the best way to do that is to have a combination of head and heart at work. It needs to be about an issue that you kind of instinctively, naturally care about, and then you have to convince yourself that you are doing it in a smart way. It doesn't have to be the perfect way. It's a trap to say, can I know this is the best thing I could give my money to? You will never know that. Don't aspire to that. Don't let the perfect be the enemy of the good. Give to something that is good and satisfying, and you'll get better at it over time. And by the way, you will probably discover an amazing community of people supporting all of the best nonprofits have around them. Incredible people who see the world in a way like you do. And so going in and getting to know that org and getting to know those people, that in itself is a happy making thing.
Did you ever see the movie About Schmidt with Jack Nicholson?
Oh, remind me. I think I did.
This is the one where he's a retired insurance guy, and he's bored out of his mind, so he gets a motorhome and he's driving around the country and all this stuff. And late one night, he's watching TV, and there's like these ads for these nonprofits, and here's 10,000 starving kids in Kenya or whatever. He's like, whatever. And then there was one where he was introduced to little Indugu just this little boy. Here he is. Here he is playing soccer with his friends in this little dirt field. And for $30 a month, you can adopt little Ndugu. So he does. And then the rest of the narrative of the movie is his letters he writes to Ndugu. And it's, first world problems. Oh, Ndugu, today my motorhome broke down and my air conditioning's not working, whatever.
Right.
And at the end, he finds out little Ndugu doesn't even read. The local teacher reads him these letters, and he breaks down crying and this whole thing. So I call that the Ndugu effect, that, the generosity to one person rather than the donor fatigue problem where, what am I going to do about 10,000 starving people in this famine?
It's a real issue that our psychology often gets in our way. I mean, that is a beautiful story. And a lot of the deepest and quickest joy from charity, from giving away, is giving to one person or to one family where you can feel it. It's like it's connecting and so forth. If we all did that, it would be hard to tackle the thorniest problems that we face. And so I think, to me, it's another example of the battle between our reflective selves and instinctive selves and so forth. Like, I think some of us, some of the time, need to say, yeah, but what actually has the most impact? And you have to try and find a way to get excited about those statistics. And there are ways to do that, actually. Like, say you're giving money and you're told, well, this is helping 1,000 children every month, in the middle of Africa. Well, that's just a number. But how about one day you go there with the org and see the actual work in action? It will change you forever, and then it becomes easier and more joyful.
Yeah, I have a personal example of this. In the 1980s, I was a bike racer, and I co-founded Race Across America, the 3,000-mile transcontinental bike race that I talked about many times. One of my co-founders, Lon Haldeman, he was for about 5 years the greatest long-distance cyclist in the history of the world. And Lon now, he's very gifted woodworker. And he's one of these guys, he's like the Mythbusters. They can make anything or, whatever. He's got a whole thing at home. He now goes to countries in South America and Africa, and he builds schools or libraries or homes with, wood. He knows how to do all this stuff. So I donate to him because it's like, I know Lon, but he also sends me pictures back. Here I am with these kids, and here we are drilling this well. And it's like, I connect to that, not just because I know him, because look, there's the pictures. There he is. There's Lon with these kids. And that makes me feel like I gotta be sure and give every year.
No, that's good. And I think it's great that you are using, so there's several things going on there. I mean, you are spending your money wisely because you trust your partner who's doing the work. And you're also giving yourself motivation to keep doing it by seeing the pictures and by getting that feedback. I think it's really good to feed yourself that way. I mean, in my line of work, I can often, go a month where all I'm seeing is just little reports on how many people have or haven't watched a given TED Talk, and it's dry. But then you hear from someone who says, I saw this and it changed my life, and you sort of shed a tear, and you suddenly realize, okay, that is very, very, that one email is far more motivating than engagement was up 10% this month.
Yeah, okay. On page 29 here of your book, you have this chart based on this little survey or study done on this sort of psychology of generosity. So your thought experiment here: Frances gives $5,000 to a charity. It pays for vital surgery that restores the sight of the child. Generosity level 97%. Okay, that's good.
That was based on my Twitter followers. They were voting.
That was your Twitter.
Okay,
Twitter.
Yeah.
But then you add that Francis is a billionaire, and then his generosity drops from 97% to 69%. Why is it? Is it just kind of a resentment of anybody that has so much wealth? It feels like they couldn't have earned that, and that it's tainted.
So it's complicated. Part of it is just the realization that if he's a billionaire, it was the easiest thing in the world for him to do 5,000, and why that wasn't much anyway. So and that is legitimate. And part of it is that we're in an age of cynicism, and we really, for very understandable reasons, resent the very rich. Feel a lot of people feel there shouldn't be a world where there are billionaires. It's not right. But in some ways, what surprised me about that result was that 67% said it was still generous. And they were going, well, I mean, it's not as generous, but it is still generous. I mean, at least he gave the money. And so here's what I think. I think that our cynicism is really dangerous right now. I think it's getting in the way of so many opportunities for making the world better, because we are sending a signal to the world's richest that they better be damn careful about anything they do with their money, or a mob is going to descend upon them with outrage and nitpicking and so forth. Is that really what we want? In other words, we're looking for signs of mixed motivation, and often we'd rather highlight the bad motives than the good motives. The stance I think we should take is that motivation for generosity, as I think I mentioned, has always been mixed. It's always, we're kind for a reason. At some level, it feels good to anyone. We're in an era right now where there are many other reasons to be generous, such as it helps your reputation, such as there may be very surprising ripple effects that come back and benefit you, as certainly has happened with Ted. Do we want to criticize the efforts because of that? I say absolutely not. Flip it. Celebrate them because of that. We should welcome mixed motivation. There's always been mixed motivation. So long as we can find some glimmer of good motivation in there, celebrate it. It is generosity at some level. And so I just think and when you do that, it allows us to start to say things, for example, to the very rich. We're not going to criticize you for what you gave or what you did, even though we might think it could have been done better. We're going to criticize you for not doing more. You've got all this wealth. Come on, let's help. We will help you spend it. Could we give you 10 amazing ideas for how you could spend that money, and would you listen? Amazingly, I think a lot of the very rich would listen. I think they want to engage, and I've seen lots and lots of evidence of this, and that if we can find ways to make giving more consequential, better thought through, more exciting even, we may be amazed at how much more money can shift.
The part of the infectiousness of infectious generosity is to shift the norms where the billionaires, the super rich, really want to do this. They don't have to be forced or whatever. They sign the pledge or whatever. That starts things rolling. But then you feel bad if you don't give, or everybody else is doing it. What is it? Isn't there that Fortune 500 givers list or whatever? Or maybe it's Forbes or whoever made that list.
Forbes.
Yeah, Forbes. Yeah, so you want to be on the I want to be on the list. Well, that reminds me of that Larry David episode of Curb Your Enthusiasm, where he gives to a hospital or whatever it is, and he'd really like the people to know he gave the money, but he doesn't want to look like he's bragging about it, but he does let it slip that it was him or whatever. Whereas the other guy gave it anonymously, and then somebody told the group that guy gave it. He didn't, and then he gets even more credit. And then Larry David's like, damn, I should have done it that way.
But think about how much energy is being wasted there. I mean, what you care about is that the money is given, and the next person watching that is going to hesitate to give the money at all. How about we just say, you're both wonderful. Thank you for giving the money. Sure, so as you know, we're going to think slightly better of you. Don't let it get to your head, but just encourage it. And that's the world that I would prefer to see at this point.
Yeah, so my friend John Mackey, the former CEO of Whole Foods and now Jeff Bezos' colleague and so on, he has this concept of conscious capitalism where he wants to change the mindset of capital. Capitalism is great, produces great wealth, it's a miracle worker, but we need to kind of get our own house in order before the government does it. So, for example, the average pay worker versus the CEO salary, it's like 400 times now, or something like that. And so he made it for Whole Foods. It can't be more than 19 times the difference, and that's the rule. And we're just going to live with that. And he would like his fellow capitalists to adopt something like that. Let's just have a new norm.
Mm. Yeah, I think that's super powerful, and I think there's a possibility that over the next years, companies will start to adopt more norms like that, some of them, because there's actually structural reasons why it makes sense to do so. I talk about this a bit, but it's a couple of things. One of the big things is just that most companies today most of the value they're creating is from non-material things. It's from basically the products of human minds, and that means that to be successful, they have to attract the best human minds. Guess what? The best human minds don't want to work for an evil entity, and so as the economy slowly and relentlessly dematerializes, which is happening, which by the way is also good for climate. More and more, you want to be the kind of company that has a beautiful story like the 19x limit, whatever. So paradoxically, that 19x limit, the first step of that is that it might reduce CEO pay by 80% or 90% or whatever. But you then start having staff who are more bought in, and you're able to recruit better, and the company starts to thrive better, and all boats rise potentially, and certainly at 19x you still have all the money you can reasonably use. So I mean, I think that's great, and companies like Chobani and Patagonia have found wonderful ways to spread the wealth, and I think there can be a lot more examples like that. And when we see them, we should celebrate them. And so I would actually love to sit down with John Mackey and learn from him.
You should do that. He actually makes a pretty strong argument. It's better for the bottom line that you do not just the pay thing, but like the neighborhood that your store is in, and the people that live around there, and the quality of the air and the water. What how the company affects the different stakeholders. It's not just your stockholders. It's your employees. It's the customers. It's the neighborhood. Everything.
Yeah. And ultimately, customers especially, like customers are more likely to come because of that story.
Yeah. Right. Okay, let's just kind of bring this to the end here. Philanthropy's true potential. What if we gave the world's change makers a chance to dream much bigger? Okay, how big? Are there certain things that only government can do to solve social problems? These are collective action problems. How far can your model take us to solving these social problems?
I mean, I think that there definitely are some things that only government can do. Government funding is at least an order of magnitude bigger than philanthropy in pretty much every country, I think. And so that's where the big bucks are. But there are many, many things that government clearly hasn't done, because here we are in a world full of problems. And so I think there's actually an incredible possibility space that is massively underexplored of what really big, bold philanthropic efforts could do. I mean, for one thing, big, bold philanthropic efforts can shape what governments do and can unlock some of the funding of governments. I've got examples of that I could talk about, but there's an entrepreneurialism that philanthropy can tap into that governments are often not so good at. And, whether it's spreading innovation in education or in healthcare, there are so many things in healthcare that are just bogged down in many countries, but that philanthropy can say, here is a much, much, much better way to do this. And so I've been thinking about this a lot, and we started doing this beautiful experiment that's turned into a beautiful project called the Audacious Project. And it started with us saying, what would happen if you said to the world's change makers, okay, go ahead and dream as big as you can. If money was no object, what honestly could you achieve? What would you dream of doing, you and your team? And what is credible that you could actually achieve if the money was there? And turns out, when you ask that question, you get amazing answers from amazing people. And so we started going through this process of picking the best of these, taking care, giving them time, giving them some resources to help shape their dream into like a credible 5-year plan, shovel ready, if you like, and one that had evidence behind it, that, here is why this team actually probably could get this done. And then you take it out to donors, not individually, but as a group. You bring in a group of donors together. So you get past this problem that irritates people of individual rich donors doing some philanthropy to suit their fancy. You get past that to, these are independently sourced projects. The donors are there to fund them or not. And what's weird, Michael, is that you see infectious generosity in action in this moment. You can have, say 30 people show up or whatever. They look round at each other, and when someone starts to support, others will join in, and you can raise astonishing amounts of money this year. We've been doing it for 5 years. The last event we had, to our astonishment, there were 10 projects funded. Just over $1 billion was committed to them, and that happened, in the last sort of 2 hours of a 2.5 day retreat. It's so exciting to see. And when you see that, you realize several things. One, that many high net worth donors, billionaires, are deadly serious about trying to do the right thing. They really want to, which is super encouraging because not a lot of people know that or believe that. Two, that there is a possibility space that is woefully underexplored. We could be dreaming much bigger about our philanthropy. And so my own dream, and honestly one of the motivations for writing this book, is to try to encourage a conversation about viewing philanthropy not as this niche little thing that a few rich people do, but as this amazing possibility space for a world in which there's so much capital, there's so much abundance, there's so much success out there. We could, if we just coordinated a bit better, if we could turn that into truly jaw-dropping projects that would bring so much delight with them and would make us all feel better about our prospects. It would make us feel better about those who are successful in our world. And by the way, I would love those projects not to just be funded by the rich, but to be visible to everyone. We already kind of unveil them at TED each year, but I think there's just so much further that we could go in terms of dreaming big. Because yes, there are so many things that governments haven't been very good at. Entrepreneurially minded change makers with huge resources behind them could take our breath away.
Yeah, man, that's beautifully put. Yeah, I think one of the things I like about your approach on this is that, it's complicated. Human nature isn't all good or all bad or selfish or selfless. And it's not just private versus government. They interact. Because they used to say, only governments could fund a space agency. Well, that's not true. Look at SpaceX. And I always hold up Elon as a model. But then people point out, yeah, but of course, most of his contracts come from the government. Okay, it's both. How about we just have both and do it that way? Governments can do a lot with tax breaks. For example, you run a nonprofit, so do I. So people that donate, they can write that off their taxes. What's wrong with that? That's a good thing. And the government makes that happen. And the same thing, the examples I always use. Apparently, the government wants me to be married because I get to get a tax deduction for that, and they want me to have kids, and they want me to own a home, so I get to deduct the interest on the mortgage. They want me to drive an electric car. I got a check from the government for buying a Tesla. Oh, wow. Okay. What else do they want me to do, right? So, yeah, I think there's ways to, nudge. Yeah, nudge. Choice architecture.
And there's also ways that philanthropy can really unlock a lot of things. One of the audacious projects that we supported was from an organization called Code for America, which has tried to bring some of the software innovation of the last few years to bear to government software, which traditionally is horrific and problematic. So you can have a situation where there's, say, in California, there was more than $10 billion worth of benefits available, but for a poor family to claim them, someone would have to, one, drive to a public library, sit down in front of a clunky old computer, go through 49 pages of impenetrable forms, asking sometimes contradictory questions, be unable to save any of that work. So if it went wrong at any stage, you have to start again. No wonder that a huge percentage of these allocated funds never got used. Code for America changed that same process into something that you could do on your smartphone in 3 or 4 minutes, and unlocked billions in government benefits. So a few millions of dollars of coding effort and interaction with the relevant government agencies unlocks 2 orders of magnitude greater amounts of government funding. That's leverage, and that's a great example of how philanthropy and government can work together.
Okay, in your last chapter, you talk about when you were 15 years old, you had this crisis of conscience being in church about this guy saying how exhausting his work was. He couldn't even sleep, thinking that there's somebody else in the world that's poorer than me, and so on and so gloomy.
Yes.
So
Yes.
I guess your point of this whole infectious generosity concept is, you don't have to donate, $1 million or whatever, $100, convert a year of suffering into a year of dignity for less than $100. Do you have $100? Which is more important, to buy your next 25 cups of coffee or to relieve someone suffering for a whole year? That reminds me of Warren Buffett's comment about, what was it, like his $50,000 haircut? And like, what are you talking about? Well, if I got a $100 haircut every 2 months for my whole life and instead invested that money, it'd be worth $50,000, so on. Those little
really,
amounts.
What really the point I was making there, Michael, was that for many people, I think, and certainly for me, for a lot of my life, thinking about generosity has been depressing because you think that you're opening yourself up to an unending set of obligations that you can actually never enjoy a guilt-free cup of coffee again. And I, in writing this book and thinking it through, one reason why I argue for this pledge of the higher of 10% of your income or 2.5% of your net worth is not just to challenge people to step up to that. It's also to say, if you do that, you don't have to do more financially. That pledge can create enough philanthropy that the world needs. And I think it's important to have moral rules that people feel, even if they're challenging, they feel that they are achievable and that you can be a moral person, but also have a good life. I want people to get lots of joy of spending money on themselves and their families, even though someone else on the other side of the world could use that money better. That's okay. There's enough resources in the world for us to, again, for the answer to be both. You could be both generous to the world and generous to yourself and your family. And I think it's, whether or not I've got that this pledge is the pledge that catches on, I really think it would be great for, those of us who are post-religion to agree on something that is at least as good as what the religions taught. And so that's why I say the higher of 10% of income or 2.5% of net worth. But it's not a nag. It's like, do it at the speed at which you can, and when you get there, celebrate and enjoy your life and spread joy, and it's okay. So
Perfect.
Anyway, that's where that came from, and thank you.
It's a great story. It's a great read. It's really fun. Infectious Generosity, the ultimate idea worth spreading, even better than TED. Get the book. We'll provide the links to your pledge, and good luck to you on doing that. Thanks for your time, Chris. I know you're busy, lined up with lots of podcast interviews and so on. It's really good to see you again.
Thanks so much. I love this conversation. Thank you.